So today's Cardinal lesson, Social Security Trust Fund accounting. Well, that sounds like it's just a Saturday night cocktail party, exciting conversation, doesn't it? Uh, so if you read the news, you listen to the news about a month ago, 2 months ago, is the Secretary of the Treasury, who's new this time around, is required by law to make an accounting to Congress of the status of the Social Security Trust Fund. And that was done. We're going to go over it today. It's 300 pages long, and people in the public basically came up with some conclusions. Number one is Social Security's going broke. Social Security's going to pay less benefits. Social Security, I mean, blah, 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 blah. And it's really concerning to me because it's real evident that a lot of the people writing articles about this stuff, even the Congress people themselves, I sincerely question whether they've read this trust fund report at all. And so I want to put it to Tom, and I want Tom to share with you, like, why are we talking about this today?
I mean, we're doing this video because Social Security serves as your base level of income in retirement. I mean, I don't care if you have millions of dollars, if you have very little money. I mean, when we're doing financial planning, this serves as your base income. And we want you to get this decision right and make good decisions here. And all too often, people are listening to their brother in law, they're listening to the news, they come up with some crazy ideas about why they should take it earlier or not. And we just want to take a step back, give you the facts, give you our opinion on how we approach this. Because we want, at the end of the day, we want you to make a good decision, make sure you're filing at the right time for you, and make sure that's part of the larger plan. So let me bring up the show notes here. You can find these below at the link on our video. They're also on our website at cardinalguide.com. We have the board, and we actually have the full trust fund report. I mean, this is 200 something pages long. I think 270 or something like that. Certainly, I don't recommend you read it all. I mean, that's gonna, unless you really want to, it's there. We've looked at it, we've read it, but that part of why we're doing the video, so you don't have to. But again, if you want to get there and you want to see all the data, they got it right here. And so page 8 gives us a really good summary. This is really what a lot of the board is on the board, so we don't want to spend a lot of time here. But if you want to look at a quick summary, here it is. Just knowing there's a lot of assumptions that get put into this. You know, you see the headlines, oh, it's going to run out at some certain date. And we do want to make the point that there is a problem here. We're not ignoring that there is a potential problem down the road. We just want to put that in context of how we approach this. So let me turn it back to Hans, and we'll get going on the board here.
Okay, so I'm going to give you some numbers and make some statements that you haven't read in any of these articles. So I'm kind of out on an island here, and people are going to be throwing tomatoes at me or something. But I'm going to give you the facts. And I pulled all this right out of that Social Security Trust Fund report. So we can start with the report was for the year 2024, and it took them till July to actually release it. It was the end of June to get it all together. And again, it's a report by law, and it showed that we began the year or ended the year 2023 with 2.2 trillion 788 billion in the Social Security Trust Fund. And we ended the year 2024 with still 2.7 billion, but a little bit less, actually 67 billion less than we had at the beginning of the year. So we took money out of the trust fund to pay some benefits, and that's not a good thing. I mean, we need to be adding to this trust fund, not taking from it. And so that has led a lot of people in the actuarial studies showing that there's going to be a year where this trust fund is going to run dry. So if we need to go to it for $67 billion, if there's nothing there, we're going to either have to pay less benefits or something. So people drew this conclusion in 2034, this baby's running dry based on all their predictions. And what I'm trying to tell you is I'm just trying to show you this piece of it and show you that there's a whole lot more money there. And we took a lot less of it than you would be led to believe. So $67 billion is a lot of money, but relative to the size of all these other numbers, it's really not. So Tom did a calculation earlier where he took what percentage of the money that's in the trust fund is 67 billion, and I believe it was, is it correct, Tom? It was 2.5%.
Correct, roughly. But yeah, 2.5% that we pulled out of the trust fund. And I do just want to pause for a second and just really say that number again. How much is currently in the trust fund is 2,720,000,000,000. I mean, that is a lot of money that's sitting there. It gives us a runway to solve this problem, right? It's not like this is blowing up right now. We have some time to fix the problem. Um, Certainly politicians need to step up and address this. One of the things that's frustrating is the longer they wait to solve it, the bigger the changes they'll need to make to shore it up. But I don't. They can't afford to not fix this problem, right? There are too many seniors that rely solely on Social Security for their income. Is if this were to stop paying all the benefits. Now, I think this is another important part. Is this isn't saying that Social Security is done in 2034. There's no more, you don't get any check. Because we'll hear that a lot. Oh, it's going to run out. I won't get anything. That's not what they're saying, because we still have, and we'll get into the funding in a second, but we still have a lot of current payroll taxes that are funding a lot of the current benefits. And so it's not that the check will stop. Even if all of this plays out, they don't fix it. Your check might be reduced, but at the end of the day, they can't afford to do that politically. Either party can't afford that. Our country, it would be a problem for our seniors in our country, and that's why I think they're going to fix this. It will be some mix of increasing taxes or different stuff. We'll get into solutions a little bit later, but there will be some solution that is given and will be passed. The longer they wait, just the bigger the change will need to be.
Okay, so there's the net worth statement right there. That's how much money Social Security has in the trust fund. Now let's look at the income statement. And Tom just made a reference to this, is in 2024, the government collected through the payroll tax, and the payroll tax is 6.2%, is that's from you during your working years. 6.2% of every check goes it goes to the Social Security trust fund or the Social Security accounting, and it is matched by your employer. So in other words, when you make $100,000, you're paying $6,200 into the trust fund or into the Social Security system, and your employer is paying $6,200, and it makes a total of 12.4%. And that's the employer and the employee. Well, that 12.4% tax on payroll, which incidentally stopped in 2024 on income above 168,000. So if you made more than that, you didn't pay this tax. But in any case, this is the taxing power of Social Security. It's 12.4%, and that amounted to almost $1.3 trillion in 2024. So this is the income statement. This is how much money Social Security took in from the tax. And this is the benefit payments. So they paid out 1.1 trillion 471 billion. So if you compare this number to that number, it's, the Social Security tax is not enough to make all the benefit payments. Okay. Now, so what they were saying is when we have no trust fund, if that truly happened, which I don't believe it's going to get to that in 2034, but if we had none, you would only have the taxing power or the taxing revenue to pay out benefits, so you'd have to cut the benefits. Now, the problem isn't quite that big because there's a couple of other sources of income. One is there was $69 billion in interest earned on the money that is in the trust fund. And Tom ran the percentage on that. What is the percentage? What's the average interest rate that Social Security is earning on its bonds that they own?
Yeah, so it's earning right at 2.5% as well. So that's what sort of what the return is on the money in that trust fund.
Okay, and so that $69 billion of interest goes to pay benefits. And that sounds like a pretty low interest rate. And the reason for that is they own long-term bonds, and interest rates have been so low for so long, the portfolio of bonds is at a low interest rate. That will slowly increase as those bonds come due, because interest rates are higher than that now. And that'll have some effect. But just so you understand, 69 billion last year. And then there's this issue of taxation of benefits. So there was $55 billion in income taxes paid on Social Security benefits, and that tax goes right to the trust fund, okay, or right into the Social Security system. So when I pay taxes on my Social Security, it doesn't go in the general federal fund like my taxes on other income. It goes directly into Social Security. And it was talked about during the campaign that we were going to eliminate taxes on Social Security benefits. And I knew this when they were saying it. The taxpayers, sure, the people that are on Social Security are going to love that, where they don't have to pay taxes on it now, because and it's only the well-to-do. Is if you have a lowish income or a low income, you're not paying taxes on your Social Security benefit. It's your other income besides Social Security that drives the taxation on the Social Security. But what I'm telling you is, as a revenue source, that brought in $55 billion last year that went directly to pay benefits. And so if you would have eliminated that tax, that would have made this problem even greater. But anyhow, the Social Security Administration collected $1.4 billion in revenue and some change. And the costs on their income statement is the benefit payments were $1,471,000,000,000. That's all the Social Security checks in America for all of 2024. The administration, the Social Security Administration, pays their own bills. So they have to pay all those people sitting in all those offices, all the office space, all the forms, all the everything. $7.4 billion it costs to run the Social Security system, and that's charged right to the whole system. And so, when they were going in there, letting people go, trying to promote efficiency and bill all earlier in this year, um, that would have been great for the Social Security system in and of itself. Um, but it's really not that much money in the scheme of things. And there were a lot of people misinformed that they thought that savings would go right into the federal treasury, and that's not correct, because they pay their own bills. And then this railroad retirement financial interchange, I'm not even going to get into that because it just takes us down another road that doesn't affect a lot of people. And so the cost for last year was 1.484 trillion. I mean, it's hard to keep saying that word trillion because it's just so much money. But that was the cost. This was the income, and there was a shortfall of 67 billion, and that 67 billion of shortfall relates to the 2.7 trillion. It's about 2.5% of it. So if we keep chipping away at this thing, as Tom said earlier, the longer we put off dealing with the problem, the harder it's going to be to solve the problem. But we're not anywhere near these conclusions that are to be drawn. So I want to put it to you, Tom, for some comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that is just important to keep in mind is there is still a lot of money in this trust fund that is there to pay benefits. And so, yes, we're not saying there can be no fixes. They need to address this. But to assume that we're not going to have any benefits there, I think is a wrong assumption. And a lot of times people they're making their choice on when they file for Social Security. And they might file earlier than what they otherwise would do, if they knew that this would be there. And that's permanently reduced their check for the rest of their lives, and that impacts their spouse if they're married, and so that can be really impactful for the financial planning. And so I think it's important to know this, to keep it in perspective context when you're making those choices. One of the things, and we had Heather Schreiber on a couple of videos ago, but she had referenced a study that in part with some other people AARP did, that really looked at to say, how do people want this to be fixed? And so they looked at different options. In summary, 85% of the respondents said they would rather increase the taxation or increase the revenue, bring in more money on the front end, and not reduce benefits on the back end. And so I really think, if politicians could just stop and take a look at that, it's very clear what people really would like to do. And yes, raising taxes is never that fun, and that's why it hasn't happened yet. But at the end of the day, that is better than cutting benefits, which ultimately they might have to do if they don't solve this problem. And by the way, that 85%, that was across political spectrum, that was across ages. It didn't matter where they were, which there's not many things right now in this country that sort of cross political lines. We're very polarized right now. But this is one where there was pretty broad agreement. It's like we'd rather increase the revenue as opposed to cutting benefits. So I just hope our politicians can stop and look at that and take that into account when they're coming to the table to try to solve this problem.
Yeah, what I'd like them to do is sit down with the people from the Treasury Department, take out that 300-page report, take one of these markers, start marking lines and asking questions, and they could really understand how the whole financial system to support Social Security works. It's like an insurance policy. It's like when you purchase an annuity from us and you transfer a lump of money into an insurance company, the insurance company promises to pay you an income starting in the future. And then once it starts, they promise to pay you that for the rest of your life. I mean, they take a big chunk of that money actually, and they add some money to it of their own money and put it in reserves so they're there to pay the future obligations. This is the same thing. Is there's a reserve fund backing up this thing because it ebbs and flows. And if you read the report, it's just there's issues that are there. And I want to acknowledge them. We need to fix this, but it's not at the state that of the people have drawn the conclusion. So if anybody wants to talk to me about it, I'd like you to have a copy of that report out there. And when I give you my answers, I'm going to direct you to pages within that report where you can read that backs up what I'm saying. Now, we ran just some simple math, and so this 12.4% tax, which is 6.2% on the employee, 6.2% on the employer, which as an employer, I don't like paying that, but I'm happy to do it just because it's funding a retirement plan for our employees. I mean, and plus it's the law. But that 12.4% collected this much money during 2024. And I said, how much more would they need to collect so that they would not have had this deficit? So we raised the 12.4 to 13, or took the 6.2 to 6.5, and that would have collected an extra $80 billion in 2024. You can't go back and do that, but just to understand something, and I'm not recommending this, proposing this. This is kind of simple arithmetic. So don't think this is I'm making a political statement here. I'm just going through some simple math. That would have increased this by 80 billion, and we would have had a $13 billion surplus instead of a $67 billion deficit. So incrementally, this isn't going to be a huge thing, and we got to mess with it and figure it out, maybe raise the retirement age a bit and phase that in over a lot of years. But all this fear mongering and people just the sky is falling kind of thing with Social Security, I'm not too high on that. And so I'm going through all this trouble of showing you the numbers, reading the numbers, because I really want you to do a couple of things. Number one is I want you to get committed to being part of the solution instead of just barking about the problem, which is, and I don't exactly know what that solution is, but I would like our politicians to take this seriously and to address it, on a bipartisan basis, and just, we got to do something to the system that's going to be ugly, but we can phase it in over a lot of years to fix the problem so people have greater trust in the Social Security system. So I'd like you to get committed to the solution. And the second thing I'd like you to do is to study your own benefits, learn about your own benefits, come to somebody like us, a financial professional that understands the Social Security system, and we can, make recommendations to you about when to start your Social Security, when your spouse starts their Social Security, and what you're going to do with your other money and income to go along with Social Security so you can have an enjoyable retirement. I'm sure that you haven't planned retirement so you can sit around worrying about Social Security. So I want to put it to Tom, and I want to see what Tom has to say about what he'd like you to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's exactly right. I mean, I think, talking to your politicians, your representatives, and just saying, "Hey, we really want this problem fixed." Because again, all the data behind the research and the studies done, the questionnaires that get sent out, people like Social Security. It's one of their favorite things that the government does for them, and not just for them, right? You funded, you paid into the system, but at the end of the day, cutting benefits is just not a realistic option, and so pressuring them in a way to sort of come to the table. Uh, Bipartisan, both sides coming together to try to solve this problem, I think would be a really smart thing to do. It's not going to take huge changes. It will certainly need to have some, right? And that's why it hasn't happened yet, just because people don't like talking about raising taxes or potentially cutting benefits. Again, I don't think cutting benefits is the way to go. But at the end of the day, this needs to be solved. Like Hans had mentioned, there's still over almost just under $3 trillion in this trust fund. That's a lot of money. So it gives us time to solve this. It's not going to go away. Your check's not going to go away anytime soon. Even if we get to that 2034 date and benefits get cut, you're still going to get a decent amount from it, 75, 80% of the check, whatever the actual numbers end up being at that time. The whole goal is to try to prevent that from happening. And we don't want you making poor decisions on your Social Security now based off what something that you're scared about happening in the future if you've never actually even looked at the numbers and really understood kind of how it all works. And so again, we're here. You can call us, we can walk you through what we would recommend as part of your plan. Again, the Social Security serves as that base level of income, and we just want you to get that right because that becomes important for the rest of your retirement.
Yeah. And so, how does this fit today's lesson in comprehensive financial planning? Well, the whole video was about Social Security, and Social Security is the first section or the first topic or the first worry we go over. And Social Security is the base income. When we do income planning, we throw the Social Security in there at the appropriate time, and then it repeats itself and increases by inflation. Medicare, we haven't really talked about that today, but Medicare has its own trust fund. Perhaps we'll do another video on that. We haven't talked about long-term care. Your 401k and IRA we haven't talked about that today, but it's the source for a lot of people that we create an income out of that to go with your Social Security, because Social Security is not enough. We already talked about income, estate planning, we haven't really talked about today, and then income taxes, we talked a little bit under the taxation of benefits and then the money going straight in there. So I want to bring Tom back on. I'm Hans Scheil.
And I'm Tom Griffith.
And we thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.